And if I told you that a large part of what holds you back today is not your real problems, but small things you decided not to let go of. Weightless comments, glances that have already passed, moments that ended long ago, but that still take up space in your mind as if they were still happening. What's unsettling is not that they exist. What's truly concerning is that you still react to them as if they define your life. And it's not because you're weak, it's because no one ever taught you to distinguish between what deserves your energy and what is only stealing it from you in silence. We live in a world where reacting has become an automatic habit. Since you were little, every reaction was reinforced without you realizing it. If you cried, someone responded. If you got upset, something changed. If you raised your voice, you got attention. Little by little, you learned that reacting was a form of control, that responding meant having a presence, that showing emotion was proof that you were alive. And yes, there is some truth to that, but that incomplete truth ended up becoming a silent trap. Because not everything that provokes you deserves a response. Not everything that moves you inside deserves to stay. You confused intensity with life, reaction with power, and that confusion has had a high cost that you are probably still paying. Stop for a moment and observe yourself with brutal honesty. How much energy have you invested in people who don't even remember what they said? How many nights did you give over to thoughts that, in the minds of others, lasted only a few seconds? How many decisions were born from wounded pride, from rage, or from fear of others' opinions? And now look at the results without excuses. It's not about blaming yourself. It's about identifying the pattern that repeats itself over and over again, because as long as you don't see the pattern, you are condemned to repeat it. And repeating it means continuing to lose time, clarity, and direction in your life. The human mind is not neutral. It never has been. It has an ancient, deeply rooted inclination to focus more on the negative than on the positive. This is not an opinion. It is something that has been observed throughout history in all cultures. One criticism weighs more than multiple praises. A rejection leaves a deeper mark than several acceptances. A loss feels more intense than many equivalent gains. And this doesn't happen because you are failing. It happens because your mind was designed to survive, not to be happy. The problem is that you are still operating with an old system in a completely different world, and that mismatch is affecting every decision you make. That mechanism that now dominates you was useful when the danger was real and physical, when ignoring a threat could cost you your life. But today, that same system is activated by things that pose no real risk. A message that didn't arrive, a tone you misinterpreted, an expectation that wasn't met. Your body reacts as if you were in danger, but you are not. And here is where an uncomfortable truth appears that many avoid facing. What affects you is not always what happened. It is the meaning you decided to give to what happened. That is the point where you truly lose or regain control. Someone ignored you, and you turned that silence into a story about your personal worth. Someone criticized you, and you used it as confirmation of your deepest insecurities. Someone didn't choose you, and you transformed it into proof that you are not enough. But those are not facts, they are interpretations. The facts are simple, they are neutral. What hurts is the story you build around them. And changing that story is not deceiving yourself, it's not denying reality, it's exercising the only real freedom you have. Deciding what meaning you give to what happens to you. That decision changes everything. Though few have the courage to assume it. I want you to do something right now, without getting distracted. Think of a recent situation that really affected you, something that took away your peace, that tensed your body and occupied your mind more than you would like to admit. Observe it without embellishment. Now answer yourself with total honesty. Does continuing to suffer over it change anything in reality? Does dedicating more anguish to it improve the outcome? Is the person involved losing sleep over the same thing as you? The answer in most cases is no. And that means you are paying a high price for something that on the other side has no cost. You are giving away your energy without anyone asking you for it. And it's not about denying the pain. The pain can be legitimate. What someone did or said might have been unfair or even cruel. That is not up for debate. What is in your hands is what you do after the moment has passed. Because there is a clear difference between feeling an emotion and turning it into a habit. Processing an emotion is necessary, It's part of being human, but getting trapped in it, E, reliving it, amplifying it, and turning it into the center of your story, that is something completely different. That is feeding suffering and calling it reflection. Every time you mentally return to that event, every time you repeat it and make it bigger in your mind, you are reinforcing a cycle that weakens you. You are training your mind to stay in what drains you, instead of moving toward what builds you up. And as long as you don't break that cycle, nothing external will really change. You can change your environment, your people, or your circumstances, but if you don't change the way you interpret and process, you will carry the same problem with you wherever you go. The most disciplined thinkers in history understood something that today is still ignored by the majority. There is a clear line between what you can control and what you cannot. What depends on you deserves all your attention, all your energy, and all your focus. What does not depend on you must be released without negotiation. Not because it's easy, not because it doesn't matter, but because insisting on controlling it is a direct waste of life. It's like trying to stop a storm with your hands. It wears you out, changes nothing, and prevents you from moving toward where you truly have power. And here is the final point that many avoid accepting. Every time you cling to something you cannot change, you are giving up your ability to move forward. You are choosing to stay in the same place while time keeps running. No one will come to rescue you from that, because that decision is entirely yours. You can keep reacting as always, or you can start choosing with clarity what deserves your energy and what does not. That choice, though it seems small, is what defines the kind of life you end up building. Now, pay attention, because this is something most avoid telling you, as it breaks with everything you think you know. Not reacting does not mean you don't feel. It does not mean you are cold or that nothing matters to you. It means you have developed control over yourself, that you are capable of letting things pass through your mind without getting trapped in them. It is allowing an emotion to arrive. You understand it, and then you let it go without turning it into a permanent burden. Many people confuse indifference with strength, but they are deeply mistaken. Indifference is disconnecting from life. It is turning yourself off. True strength is feeling everything and still deciding intelligently how you are going to act in the face of it. Observe this clearly, because here there is a difference that changes the course of your life. Indifference closes you off, hardens you, it makes you distant. Strength, on the other hand, keeps you open, but with clear limits. It is knowing when to get involved and when to withdraw without losing control. Think of water flowing down a river. The water does not stop in front of an obstacle. It does not complain. It does not get frustrated. It simply finds the way and keeps moving forward. Over time, it is not the water that changes. It is the rock that ends up yielding. That is a type of silent power that most underestimate, because it makes no noise, but it transforms everything it touches. There are people who have lived through hard times, who have been hurt, who have faced unfair situations, and yet they do not carry that as a visible chain on their body or in their attitude. They don't live tense, they don't live defensively, they don't turn their past into a permanent excuse. Those people were not born with something special. They learned something that others ignore for years. That peace is not eliminating problems. Peace is knowing what is worth your attention and what is not. It is a conscious decision that is trained, not something that appears by chance. When you hear the phrase act as if it doesn't affect you, it is easy to misinterpret it and fall into dangerous extremes. It's not about repressing what you feel or pretending in front of others that everything is fine when it isn't. It's about something much deeper and more demanding. Training yourself not to respond automatically to everything that bothers you. Because every time you react without thinking, you are letting a primitive part of you take control. And that part is not designed to build a conscious life. It is designed to survive, to defend itself, to attack or flee without thinking about the consequences. That ancient system, which was once useful, today betrays you more than it helps you. It pushes you to say words you later wish you could take back. It makes you act from pride instead of from intelligence. It leads you to break relationships that could have been saved, and to close doors that later you need to open again. And it all happens in seconds, in impulsive decisions that later become long regrets. That is the price of not having control over your reaction. But here is where everything starts to change if you decide to do it differently. When you begin to act calmly, even when something provokes you, something powerful happens. Little by little, you stop feeling so affected, not because you are pretending, but because your way of acting begins to shape what you feel. Your behavior influences your mind just as much as your mind influences your behavior. It's a two-way street, and when you understand it, you can use it to your advantage instead of being a victim of it. If you force yourself to remain calm, even if there is noise inside, over time that noise loses strength. If you decide to maintain a firm posture, even if you feel insecure, you begin to perceive yourself differently. If you choose to respond with clarity, instead of reacting impulsively, the intensity of the problem decreases. It's not something mystical, it's repeated practice, it's mental discipline applied every day until it becomes part of who you are. Now let's go deeper, because here is a truth that many avoid facing. What affects you today is not always only about what happened today. Many times, what you feel comes from much earlier. It may be a wound you never closed, a constant need for approval, a fear of rejection, or of not being enough that you have been dragging for years. And when something in the present touches that point, the reaction multiplies. It hurts not only for what it is, but for everything it represents to you. That completely changes how you should look at it, because then the problem is not always the current situation, but what that situation awakened in you. And if you don't make that distinction, you will continue to react exaggeratedly to things that in reality are only activating something deeper. Understanding this gives you power because it allows you to decide where to focus your energy, on the superficial or on what really needs to be worked on within you. There is something else you need to understand if you want to regain control of your life. Your attention is one of the most powerful tools you have. It is not just looking at something, it is feeding that with your energy. Everything you pay attention to grows, strengthens, and takes up more space in your mind. And that applies to both good and bad. If you focus on criticism, you make it bigger. If you repeat an injustice in your mind, you make it more present. If you relive a humiliation, you turn it into part of your identity. While you do that, you are neglecting to feed what really matters. You are neglecting your ability to create, to move forward, to build healthy relationships, to live with clarity. You are spending your energy on something that already ended or that was never under your control. And that is one of the most costly mistakes a person can make. Because you not only lose time, you lose direction. Now, answer yourself something with total honesty. Every time you lose your calm, every time someone manages to get you off your center, who really benefits? Because there are people who only feel strong when they manage to provoke you. There are situations that only grow when you react. And every time you respond without control, you are showing exactly where they can touch you to destabilize you. You are revealing your weak point without realizing it. Not reacting is not being weak, it's quite the opposite. It is a sign of personal mastery that very few develop. Not letting yourself be affected is not disconnecting from the world, it is stopping being controlled by it. It is a type of power that no one can give you and no one can take away because it is built from within. And that power does not appear overnight. It is formed in every decision, in every moment where you choose to think before acting. It all comes down to an instant that most ignore. That small space between what happens and what you do afterward. That is where everything is defined. That is where your character, your discipline, your ability to direct your life are built. If you learn to master that space, you begin to truly live. If not, you will continue reacting automatically, repeating patterns, and wondering why nothing changes. I want you to do an uncomfortable but necessary exercise. Think of someone you know or have closely observed who has a stability that few understand. A person who under pressure does not lose control or become paralyzed, who in the face of criticism does not break or react with rage, who, when facing problems, does not exaggerate or ignore them, but simply looks at them, understands them, and acts. If you analyze it honestly, you will see that that person did not have an easy life. In fact, it is almost always someone who went through hard times, but at some point made a decision that most avoid making. They stopped allowing the external to dictate their internal world. That decision, though it seems simple to hear, is one of the most difficult to sustain in real life. It is deciding that what happens outside of you does not have automatic permission to control what happens inside of you. And when you start living that way, even if it comes out imperfectly at first, even if you only achieve it in certain moments, something begins to change. Your relationships change. The way people interact with you changes because you no longer respond as before. When you stop being predictable in your reaction, your environment loses control over you. When you don't feed the conflict loses strength. When someone expects you to react with anger and you respond calmly, you break the pattern. When someone tries to provoke you and doesn't succeed, they lose interest or change their strategy. You won't always change others. That would be an illusion, but you do stop participating in dynamics that previously wore you out. You stop being part of the problem without realizing it, and that, though it may not seem like it at first, is a form of power that transforms your life over time. But there is something deeper that most ignore. The most important conversations are not the ones you have with others. They are the ones you have with yourself every day. That constant internal dialogue that never stops, that voice that interprets everything that happens to you, that decides what each situation means, and that builds the story it believes about you. That internal narrator can propel you, or can slowly destroy you if you don't train it. You cannot turn off that voice. That's not realistic, but you can educate it. You can question it when it exaggerates. You can stop it when it turns something small into a disaster. You can correct it when it takes something personally that isn't. Because many people live with an uncontrolled internal dialogue that turns any problem into something huge, that takes every mistake as proof of inability, and that relives past stories as if they were still happening today. And if you don't change that voice, nothing outside will be enough. Here's a truth that few accept, but that you need to hear without filters. Life does not reward the one who suffers the most. There is no system that rewards you for how much you endured or how much something hurt you. The world responds to something else. It responds to the clarity with which you think, to the firmness with which you decide, and to the consistency with which you move forward, even when you don't have everything in your favor. And to do that, you need energy, but not just any energy. You need well-directed energy. Not everything deserves your energy. And understanding that makes a radical difference. It's not coldness, it's not becoming distant, it's maturity. Because immaturity reacts to everything without a filter, while maturity carefully chooses where to invest its attention. And that choice, repeated day after day, is what ends up defining your life. Much more than luck, much more than your circumstances, much more than what others did or didn't do to you. Even if you don't see it clearly at this moment, you are building something with your life. Perhaps you are in a confusing stage. Perhaps you feel like you aren't advancing as you would like. But every decision counts. Every time you choose not to get hooked on something that doesn't deserve it, you are building. Every time you respond from calmness instead of from the wound, you are moving forward. Every time you decide to let go of something that was consuming you, you are recovering power. Because in the end, it all comes down to something very simple but very serious. The keys to your inner world. Who enters, who stays, what thoughts repeat themselves, what emotions settle in. That was always yours, even if no one ever taught you that way. And even if you spent years without exercising that control, it is still yours today. The difference is whether you decide to use it or continue handing it over without realizing it. You don't need to wait for everything to be perfect to start. You don't need to have total clarity or feel ready. The moment is now, in the midst of what you are living, with what you have and with what you lack. Because strength does not appear when everything is fine. It is built right here, when you decide not to let yourself be dragged by what brings you nothing. It is built when you choose to think before reacting, when you choose to remain firm, even if there is noise inside. And over time, you will notice something that cannot be faked. Your way of seeing things changes, your way of responding changes, and as a result, your life changes. Not because the world became easier, but because you became stronger, clearer, and more in control of yourself. And when the way you look changes, everything you see changes. If you made it this far, I want you to do more than just listen. Write in the comments a commitment phrase to yourself. I decide what deserves my energy. Write it and read it out loud. because what you repeat with intention begins to stay in your mind. Subscribe to the channel if you want to keep training this way of thinking, because here you won't find excuses. You will find truths that force you to grow. And share this video with someone you know needs to hear this, because sometimes a single idea at the right moment can change the course of a life.